Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you all to today's webinar. Our webinar is called Using Technology to Promote Healthy Social Norms. My name is Laura Fiedler, and I'm joined here by Joanna DiCostanzo, our fantastic public health intern here at the New York City Alliance Against Sexual Assault. I'm also really pleased that we're joined by today's guest presenters, two New York City-based allies and friends in prevention. We have Nancy Schwartzman, creator of the Line Campaign and the Circle of Six app, and Emily May, founder and executive director of Holla Back. So before we get started, I want to mention a few things about webinar logistics. If you can hear me, you've obviously dialed in for the audio. But if you get a frantic email from a friend who's unable to hear us, please remind them to call in, and you can see the number here at the top of the slide. And if you have any difficulty with the actual web presentation, please call us at the number you see listed at the bottom of this slide. All participants have been muted in order to avoid any challenges with the audio. We'll be taking your questions and comments throughout the presentation using the text chat box at the corner of your screen. At any time during the webinar, please do share any questions or comments and type them into the text chat box, and they'll be seen only by the presenters. Also, the slides are going to advance automatically, so if there's any information that you missed, you will definitely be able to access today's recording, the slides, and a resource list from the Alliance website shortly after the presentation. So really quickly, just a little bit about us. The Alliance is one of two centers of excellence in primary prevention, along with our sister COE, the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And we encourage you to visit the Center of Excellence pages of our website, where you can access primary prevention resources, articles, our annual prevention newsletter, and follow our blog. You can also sign up for the Alliance Weekly Digest and share your organization's primary prevention program announcements so that we can feature them in the digest. I want to quickly highlight our learning objectives for today's webinar. So we hope that you'll have a greater understanding of the role that technology can play in perpetuating harmful norms at the root of sexual violence. But most importantly, we hope you'll have a greater awareness of the innovative and creative ways that technology is being used to resist violence and to promote health. Participants will learn from Emily and Nancy what some of the challenges are using technology as part of social norms change efforts. But we hope you'll also feel more confident and more able to incorporate technology in simple, accessible ways into your existing prevention efforts. So let's begin by revisiting some of the fundamental principles of primary prevention. In order to prevent sexual violence, we know that we have to address the harmful norms that are at sexual violence's root. Prevention literature suggests that these harmful norms include limiting objectifying roles for women and notions of femininity. Also traditional constructs of masculinity that emphasize dominance. A culture that is generally accepting and tolerant of violence at all levels of the social ecology. And you can see examples of those in the ecological model to the left of the slide. A society that values power over others, which manifests in all forms of oppression. And finally, notions of privacy that foster secrecy and shame, and which often result in the silencing of victims of violence and oppression. In order to prevent sexual violence, we're tasked not only with discouraging violent and unhealthy norms, but also promoting healthy norms in their place, those that we believe are protective against sexual violence. So we'll take a look briefly at ways that technology can perpetuate unhealthy norms, as well as recent efforts to combat those tech abuses. But today we're going to primarily focus on the ways that technology is being used for health promotion to create a world free from sexual violence. So if we take a look at the guiding documents provided by the New York State Department of Health for the Rape Crisis and Sexual Violence Prevention Program, we see an emphasis on targeting youth with our efforts, specifically youth between 10 and 21 years old. The New York State Sexual Violence Primary Prevention Plan notes that there's growing evidence about the impact of sexual violence in the lives of youth. According to the 2009 New York State Youth Risk Behavioral Survey, 1 out of 8 female high school students and 1 out of 7 high school males reported that they have been forced to have sex when they did not want to in their lifetime. Findings from a 2008 study here at the Alliance, a study of 1,300 New York City high school students, showed that 1 in 6 report having experienced sexual violence. That study also showed us that young people tend to seek out peer support. Of those who self-identified as having experienced dating or sexual violence, 72% told friends first. Only 13% first told a parent, and 12% first told another adult. So Nation et al.'s 2005 list of 9 principles for effective primary prevention efforts is also a guiding document for our work. I think 4 of those principles are especially relevant to our discussion today. That prevention efforts should be appropriately timed, that they're initiated early enough to have an impact on youth development and be sensitive to developmental needs, that they use varied teaching methods to enhance knowledge and skills, that they be socioculturally relevant and tailored to the community and cultural norms of youth, and include them in the program planning and the implementation. And finally, that they emphasize positive relationships, that they recognize the potential which youth already possess and build upon their strengths. And if we begin our prevention work by understanding youth culture and building on youth's existing assets, we have to recognize that youth are using technology expertly and engaging with digital media now more than ever. We also know that this creates new opportunities and spaces for practitioners to engage youth meaningfully on a variety of health and social justice issues. For example, a 2011 study explored the extent to which social networking sites are being used for sexual health promotion activities and found that 43% of nonprofits and 16% of government agencies are using social networking sites to disseminate health messaging and educational content. Facebook was the most commonly used site at 71%, followed by MySpace at 46% and Twitter at 30%. But we recognize that unhealthy social norms are everywhere. They manifest in our culture and society all around us, and even technology, which has brought people closer and created new opportunities to exchange knowledge and ideas, is also a realm where power and controlling and violent dynamics play out.
So our first interactive question is a text chat question, and we encourage you all to participate by answering the question and putting your responses in the text chat window below at the left-hand corner of your screen. So the question is, in your experience, what are some of the ways in which technology is misused to perpetrate harm? Okay, so I'm seeing some great responses. Tracy mentioned bullying. Bethany mentioned online stalking. Emily mentioned online harassment. Louisa said sexting and cyberbullying. All of these are really great, and we're going to talk about them in the next upcoming slides. Some anti-women messages on Twitter. That was another suggestion. And sharing pictures without consent was also suggested by Tracy, and that's another topic that we'll discuss in the next slide.
So I see a lot about unhealthy communication, controlling partners, using technology for peer pressure. It seems that there's an emphasis on sexting and the bullying and pressure that comes now through text messages pressuring young people to send sexual photos. I see Twitter rants. I saw a specific hashtag, the hashtag #ThankAFeminist on Twitter, that were actually totally anti-women. So thanks for all of these. These are great examples. We're going to talk just briefly about this because, again, we want to focus on the positive, but I think it is important to acknowledge these. And like I said, you've already given us a lot of these examples. So we're seeing tactics like cyber stalking in desktop applications that use geolocation information. So there's a desktop application called Creepy, which uses geolocating from public information like Flickr accounts or Twitter accounts. If those detection features are turned on, these features can be used to locate someone unbeknownst to them. We're definitely seeing unwanted circulation of nude images and sexual images, in many cases of underage youth. And we see that on forum sites such as Reddit, where these images are being distributed and cataloged and discussed without the consent of the subject. We're seeing consequences, rather unintended consequences of sexting. Sexting does not have to be an unhealthy thing. It could be part of your healthy sexual development and communication, but the unintended consequences are serious. So a national campaign survey from 2008 showed that 20% of teenagers report sending or posting nude or semi-nude pictures of themselves. But nearly 40% say it's common for those photos to be shared with people other than the intended recipient. And we're also seeing power and control over partners' devices and accounts. Common tactics that we know are occurring with technology is that partners are demanding to know passwords and login information, that they're snooping through emails and texts, they're demanding nude photos, they're calling relentlessly, and constantly inquiring about a person's whereabouts and who he or she is with. A 2007 study of tech abuses in teen relationships showed that more than 1 in 10 teens report that a partner has shared private or embarrassing pictures or videos of them. 17% say that their partner has made them afraid not to respond to a cell phone call, an email, an IM, or a text message, and that 10% claim that they have been threatened physically through some of those channels. But fortunately, the good news is that we're seeing promising efforts to prevent and respond to some of those abuses, including the Location Protection Privacy Act of 2012, or the Stalking Apps Bill. And that was introduced in the Senate by Senator Al Franken from Minnesota. So the bill, which just passed through the Judiciary Committee, requires companies to get a customer's permission before collecting or sharing his or her location data, and it would make it a crime to intentionally operate geolocating applications to facilitate stalking. The bill intends to hold accountable those who are enabled by and exploit GPS tracking technology. Another effort to combat tech abuses is the campaign Take Back the Tech, and that is initiated by the Association for Progressive Communications Women's Networking Support Program. And that campaign takes place during the annual 16 Days of Activism Against Gender Violence. And it suggests one action per day to explore different aspects of the intersection between violence against women and information and communication tools. For example, Take Back the Tech encourages users to understand the way that sexist trolling and misogyny works to really destabilize feminist and anti-violent spaces online, and to show their support for peer authors when their ideas or identity is attacked in comments or blogs. And a final example is the campaign That's Not Cool, and you can see some of the images showing here on the slide. So That's Not Cool is a public education campaign created by Futures Without Violence, the Office on Violence Against Women, and the Ad Council. The site features animated videos, a scene from which you can see on the right, that depict scenarios of textual harassment, pressuring for nude photos, constant calling, and other invasions of privacy through the use of our various devices. Youth can respond to the video with reactions, advice, or stories. The site also features call-out cards, which you can see examples of on the left, that youth can send to someone who's demonstrating harassing or controlling behavior. But even more than just combat harmful uses of technology that can perpetuate violent norms, we want to emphasize the positive, health-promoting applications of technology that can enhance our prevention work. Prevention literature suggests that protective factors from sexual violence include problem-solving skills, a sense of self-efficacy, strong peer relationships, social support, a sense of belonging, and availability of services. Efforts to strengthen many of these factors can be found in the technologies we'll discuss today. And incorporating technology into your existing primary prevention work is a creative way to engage youth, meet them where they're at, and build on their expertise. It may not be the focus of your prevention curriculum or model, but it can be a way to keep young audiences connected to the prevention principles that you're already planning to introduce.
So our first guest presenter is filmmaker and media strategist Nancy Schwartzman. Named one of the 10 filmmakers to watch in 2011 by Independent Magazine, Nancy is the director of the award-winning documentary film The Line, as well as the short film XOXO SMS, a love story that explores how technology can create digital intimacy. Nancy is also the founder of The Line campaign, and she spearheaded a team that won the White House Apps Against Abuse Technology Challenge with the creation of the iPhone and Android Circle of Six app. Welcome, Nancy, and thank you for joining us today and giving us insight into your amazing work.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Can everyone hear me all right? I'm using speakerphone, but I hope that it's okay.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, I'm really thrilled to be here with you all, allies and advocates, the people that do the hard work in the field every day. It's really an honor to share my work with you and hear from you. And thanks for the New York City Alliance Against Sexual Assault for inviting me to participate. And it's an honor for me and a pleasure to be featured alongside How That creator, Emily May, who is a colleague I've known for a long time. I thought I would just start speaking to you all from the position I wear, as you can see from that opening slide, I wear a bunch of different hats in my work, and I also define technology, since we're talking about technology, broadly. I define technology as film, online videos, PSAs, social media. Now someone just said they can't hear me very well. Is that across the board?
I think that these tend to be sort of quiet. I think if you're using a speakerphone, it's best to speak directly into the handset if it's possible. But it may be that folks who are listening from speakerphones are also having volume issues.
Okay, well, I went off speaker, so we'll see how that works.
Perfect. Use your biggest presentee voice, Nancy.
Okay, I will scream. I'm in a shared office right now in Washington, and they're being very generous by letting me be here. And now let's see how generous.
Perfect. We're getting good feedback already.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Okay, so anyway, I was just saying that I define technology as films, online videos, social media platforms, and mobile tech. And as the introduction said, I directed the film The Line, which is about sexual assault, and most recently XOXO SMS, which is actually a really nice palate cleanser to The Line, and it can be used as a tool to look at how technology isn't scary and relationships can be forged using digital pathways. So it's a very sweet, positive film that also manages to sort of promote a healthy intimacy and a healthy relationship. As an anti-violence advocate, and I'll talk about this more, I created the Line campaign. But I also want to mention 2 other campaigns I've worked on because they might be good tools for you as well. I created the Not Invisible campaign to go with the documentary I'm sure you've all heard about, The Invisible War. The Invisible War looks at rape in the U.S. military. And I encourage everyone, if you all have constituents that are veterans or active duty or friends or parents of, it's a really fantastic film, and the Facebook community is very vibrant. The other film I'm currently supporting is called Girl Model that I want to just bring to people's attention. It just had a PBS broadcast, but it will be online for a month. And Girl Model is about the exploitation of young girls being sucked into modeling jobs, and I put modeling in quotes. It's very thinly veiled trafficking, and it's a really, really good look at sort of exploitation of labor and also sexualization of youth. So those are 2 films I encourage you all to check out in addition to my own films. And we will also talk about, lastly, the mobile app Circle 6. So just to get started, we'll move over here to this slide. Okay. Why I bring up all my projects really is because they share these common themes of sexual assault, exploitation, but also intimacy and technology. All of the films and videos can be used as teaching and prevention tools. Oh, I'm glad to hear from Tracy that she watched Girl Model. Awesome. So yes, and I also wanted to say, because I have to hop out a little bit early, please feel free to chime in with questions as we go along, and I will gladly answer them. The other piece I wanted to say, I really appreciated the New York City Alliance intro. I think it was really solid and kind of grounds us in the work that we're doing. First and foremost, I come to this work as a sexual assault survivor. And as I get older and sort of incorporate that experience in almost everything I do, I make a point to be public about it. So I was public about it in a film, but at every conference and every screening and every event I go to, I talk about it. So if I'm there with a film, I out myself as a survivor. If I'm in a technology environment, I say that. And it's not it doesn't get easier as I get older, but I'm now just more determined across the board. If I'm speaking at the United Nations, I'm going to say it. Because what I'm seeing more and more, it's so important to talk about it in diverse spaces, both to destigmatize it as an issue for the victim and survivor, but to also confront people who sort of have the luxury not to think about it. So I sort of put it out there in all facets of my work, excuse me, as sort of the core central reason for why I do it. So I'll first just talk about the line. I'm just curious if folks out there on this webinar have seen the film or use it in their work. So I don't want to talk too much about it if everyone's like, yeah, we know it over and over. But let's see, seen it? Okay, well I do hope people also use it. Oh good, I'm glad there's some newbies to the crowd. Well the film, we'll just start there. It's a 25-minute film. It took about 5 years to produce. It's a personal documentary, very raw. It uses my own personal story of a sexual assault that about 7 years ago, Cosmo magazine wrote an article called Gray Rape. I'm sure everyone remembers this nightmare, which basically detailed several accounts of legitimate, of actual rape, but just where a young woman had been drinking prior, or a young woman had flirted with a man that then raped her. It was basically this kind of repackaging of acquaintance rape as if it's a new concept. So the film really goes to address that who is the perfect victim? That bar is set so high, no one is the perfect victim. So my story is non-consensual anal rape during sexually consensual sex. So it's this sort of gray, messy kind of story to dissect that I felt was very important to put it out there, that this isn't stranger rape. I compare that rape to a stranger rape that happened to my friend, unfortunately. But it also looks at rape culture at large. I speak with Dawn McPherson. We talk about rape culture. I go to spring break and film Panama City. Terrible but very instructive lines like 75% of the bitches out here are using alcohol as an excuse to fuck. 25% are just whores. That's a statement out of a partier's mouth at spring break. So if anyone says rape culture doesn't exist, you can always kind of trot out some of the things that were filmed in the line. So the line is 25 minutes and has been used now at over 1,000 universities. And what we wanted to do with the film was really start a conversation about rape culture and victimhood. And the key targets were college campuses, because we know the numbers there, at least 1 in 4 women. We also know that universities do not hold perpetrators accountable. It's a very dangerous time for young women, and that we need to do more around education there. So in addition to the film itself, we started the Line campaign, which has now become a nonprofit. Marketing, and I'm sure Emily will talk about this as well, marketing when you're talking about sexual assault, rape, abuse, bullying, and harassment is really important if you're trying to reach not just the converted, people who know about these issues, but young people who are impacted by violence but are maybe too afraid to get engaged, or turned off by the language rape, or even, unfortunately, the word feminist. Michelle, I'll answer your question in a moment, because asking about if this can be used for high school kids, it's absolutely appropriate for high school kids. It's just very hard to get it into a public school. And that's been one of the limitations of the film, because you need to be honest and you need to be authentic when you're talking about sexual assault and rape culture. And that's fairly R-rated material. The film is distributed at Media Education Foundation, which is mediaed.org. is where you can find it. And we can talk about workarounds for high school students. I've shown it at after-school programs, and I've shown it in private high schools. But it's just very hard to get sexual content that's worthwhile in your average U.S. public high school. I just wanted to say a piece here about the marketing. We package this film as being about sex, consent, power, and pleasure. And always having sex positive at the center of the work, and this notion that pleasure is your right. Pleasure for a young person is not anything to be ashamed about. And good sex should feel good, right? So that's sort of how we position the LINE campaign to get your average college student through the door. The other key thing about the film is we didn't just want to make a film about rape and my story and this larger problem and have people walk out saying, what can I do? How do we change this, with feelings of hopelessness? So we created the LINE campaign to go with it. The LINE campaign is, you can find everything at whereisyourline.org, but it's really a very, very simple technique. It's you show the film and then you ask people, where is your line? The film looks at the line of consent and then just challenges the viewer to think about their own boundaries and their own desires. And what I learned from this, we have over 1,000 responses from around the country, all different demographics, all different campuses, after-school programs, inner-city programs, so all different kinds of kids answering. Young men very often would answer, I never knew I had one, or I never knew I was allowed to have a line. So there's this notion that men are not supposed to have boundaries. That's the toxic masculinity culture where men are supposed to want sex in all shapes and sizes and whatever, they don't have limits, which is A, absolutely false, and B, very dangerous. Because if you're in bed with a partner who's male who doesn't think that they have limits, then they're not really thinking of their partner's limits. To answer your question, Aisha, absolutely. The line has been used in LGBTQ settings. A lot of our audience members speak to this in the Where is Your Line answer. I am gay, no anal, whatever it is. We get all kinds of answers. My story is a heterosexual one. But the other piece of the line is it's a very specific story, but because of its specificity, it also is very universal. So it's a film about my own story. I'm a straight woman, rape culture in the U.S., but it's been shown in Liberia at the Carter Center. With my partnership actually with Emily and Hollaback, it was shown in India and Argentina and all these places because we know that the themes of victim blaming are universal. So it absolutely can be used in any kind of context. You as the educator just needs to frame it and make sure that you tease out relevant bits, but most of the audience is able to make it about their own stories. And that's what I wanted the film to do, was create a way for people to find themselves in this story. I just want to name a few partnerships that were really useful. Men Can Stop Rape, working with men, that's a big part of this campaign, is bringing men to the table, men as prevention allies. The New York City Alliance was great. I mentioned Hollaback as well. Just a quick roundup of some of the limitations of the film. As we said, it's R-rated, so getting into high schools is challenging, although they see this stuff all the time. They watch on TV, they watch Skins, they watch HBO. I mean, this is not new for them. High school kids get it. Unfortunately, we need middle school kids to get it. We need 5th graders to get it. So I challenge us all to try and come up with content that younger and younger kids can understand, that feels legitimate, that that also addresses the issue. So I just want to say another thing, and I offer you my contact info at the end so you get in touch if you are interested. In April, 2 professors from Duke University will be publishing a study they did, polling incoming freshman students at Duke using the line as part of their research around rape myth acceptance. So the Rape Myth Acceptance Survey at Duke University will be presented in April, and if you all want to see the results, let me know, and I can get them to you when they're published. Sadly, the results are not good. Rape myth acceptance really is very high for incoming students at Duke University, so we can imagine that that's a pretty similar throughout the rest of the country. So I am going to kind of transition into talking about Circle of Six, but what came up in the process of traveling the country for over 3 years with the line was a real understanding of what's going on for young people of college age around sexuality, going out, hooking up, and sexual assault. So we opened up the discussion with the film, and we gathered hundreds and hundreds of testimonies. So here are some stats about sexual assault that you're familiar with. On the positive side, when we look at the tools, doing smartphone research, 90% of young people say texting is important to building friendships. 75% say their phones never leave their side. And I think 60%, it's over 60% of college students use smartphones. So in 2011, the White House teamed up with HHS and put forth the Apps Against Abuse Technology Challenge. As you know, VP Biden has been a real force for good with Violence Against Women Act and really standing up against rape. And he teamed up with the CTO, and they put forth this challenge. So I teamed up with ISIS, an organization in Oakland, and we brought on an engineer and user interface designer and went after the challenge. I am going to see about the results. Yes, sorry, I'm just looking at the questions. Yes, Elizabeth, when we get the results from the Rape Myth survey, I'll make sure that the Alliance has them as well, because we want them as public and published as possible. So, all right, so here we were. Knowing that kids are using smartphones, knowing that also we had an administration, and we still have an administration that's sympathetic to the plight of young women, and VP Biden really wanted to see movement on creating safer environments for college women. So coming out with this challenge, we jumped at the opportunity, and what was really important about creating this mobile tool is at its core it be judgment-free. This is a judgment-free harm reduction tool that focuses on peer support. So we incorporated stories, for example, University of Connecticut, a student told me that she was drugged by a bartender, woke up after a gang rape, miles from campus, completely lost, and with no sense of where she was and no way to get home. Another young woman at Cornell had to make a hard decision one night. She found herself alone at a frat party. Should she walk across a dark campus by herself? Should she sleep at the frat among all these people she doesn't really know? Or let an acquaintance take her home? She took the third option, and he raped her. Another student at Wisconsin asked me if it was okay that her boyfriend was demanding her passwords and constantly trying to look at her phone. So these are the kinds of stories we were hearing from people, and like this is what informed the creation of the Circle of Six app. So basically, I will get to our solution slide. Just hearing anecdotally what was going on for young people and understanding that at 2 o'clock in the morning, your average college student on a Friday night has probably consumed alcohol. That's just how it goes. Understanding for college students, they're away from home, their friends are like their family. Who is their support network? People already are using kind of an informal buddy system. We wanted to sort of formalize that with a mobile tool. So the other piece, I can tell you all how the app works. Are folks on this call familiar with Circle of Six? I would love to show you the demo video, but we can't really support video on here. I'm just curious if people know about how it works. So I can go into that a little bit. It's very simple. It is a free app on iPhone and Android, and it connects. You download it as the user. It connects you. You choose 6 people that you want to put in your circle. You can choose fewer than 6. You can choose 3. You can even choose 2. Maximum is 6 though. And we encourage you on our website, circleof6app.com, how to pick a friend. Who should be in your circle? Think about it. Someone that you trust, hopefully someone that's nearby, someone that you feel you can call in an emergency. So what it does is get you thinking about, number 1, your own safety, right? And number 2, who are the people in your life that you can trust? So you plug them into your phone, and then it has 3 pre-programmed SMS messages. If you can see from the little slide, on the left is a car icon. And you click that, and it sends a pre-programmed message that says, come and get me. I need help getting home safely. And it will send your GPS coordinates to your friends. And next to it you can see the little map. So you can send that at any hour. If you have a terrible sense of direction like I do and used to go to parties in the middle of Brooklyn, I don't have to give random landmarks in the middle of the night. I can just hit that, and the 6 people I trust will get the information. The second button in the middle is a little phone button, and that says, call and pretend you need me. I need an interruption. And we joke sometimes that's the bad date app. So you're cornered at a party, and you're trying to get out of the situation. Someone's not reading your cues, and you just wish your phone would ring. This actually tells your friends, hurry up and call. And that way you can excuse yourself, have a reason, and get out of there. The third one is a chat bubble, so they need to talk. This is to address dating violence. It has resources embedded into that message, and it's a way to break the silence around dating violence and break the isolation. So if someone in your circle, if you're worried that you're not crazy about their partner, you have bad feelings about it, red flags, you can learn more with that link, and your circle can be informed that those are resources out there and that it's a yellow light alert. It's not hurry up and do something for me right now. If I'm reaching out, just letting you know. The third piece, the last piece, excuse me, the exclamation point are emergency hotlines. 2 are pre-programmed, US-based. One is RAIN, and one is Love is Not Abuse. And then the third one is oh, it's okay. The third button is the user can choose it. So if you don't feel that dialing 911 is a safe option for you, you can put in your campus security. Or if you, like many of our users, are international, they can choose a number in England or a number in Australia, wherever they are. That makes sense for them. So that was another key thing, was really putting the user experience at the center and what makes that person feel safe and empowered. So you choose your circle, and you choose your emergency hotline number. The other piece that was very important was the design. We wanted really engaging and fun and social in case you have someone who's looking over your shoulder. And whether that's a jealous partner or you're in a dangerous situation, it doesn't look like a police badge or spelling crossbones or anything like that. It has an engaging and fun design to it, to not attract attention. I want to also point out to folks, we have several resources that we've written. A great one is the Healthy Relationship Toolkit. A study in Pediatrics magazine this fall surveyed 600 guidance counselors in the US. 80% of them did not have any resources to address teen dating violence. Although the CDC has said that this is a huge problem, they absolutely had nothing to address the issue with their young people. We had heard on our homepage, we have a video that just describes how the app works. And I thought, okay, I'm going to create a demo video so people can watch it and know how to use the app. But I was hearing from teachers that they were using the video just to even break the ice and talk about dating violence with their students and talk about sexual assault. So spurred by that data from the pediatrics article, we paired up with the public health professor who did the study and wrote a toolkit that really addresses and speaks in the language of 7th and 8th graders, teasing out the difference between drama versus danger, talking about tech abuse and password abuse and stuff like that. So I encourage you all. It's free. It's really concise and hopefully useful to your demographic if you're trying to talk about healthy relationships for young people and knowing the red flags. Let's see, what else do I have for you all? Right, so we have some good news, exciting news. We've had great user response on the app. It is, yes, just to answer your question, Hamali, Circle of 6 apps.com. If you go to materials, you can download the toolkit, the postcard. The video is free and embeddable. A ton of stuff is right there. So all of it is free. All of it is usable and downloadable. So, so here's the great feedback. The press has been wonderful. They're very excited. They feel like they've found a solution. And you know, I think the press, I'm sure Emily will speak to this too, is always looking for kind of a quick fix to the race epidemic. So unlike The Line, my film, which asked a lot of really hard-hitting questions, people are almost relieved that there are these tools being built and being used to address the issue, and they are merely one tool in a huge box that we all need to be using. But I think the press has really held on to this, been excited about it because it is a positive in a sea of negatives. So hold on, I'm just going to type in the address because people are asking about it. Our website is here, circleof6app.com. You can find everything there, and I think someone from the Alliance can send you all the Line campaign link. Okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely be sending out all of the resources that you're hearing about today and seeing on the slides. We'll have a resource list downloadable from our website, as well as the recording of today's presentation and the slides.
Great. Awesome. So I want to talk about some of the limitations that we've come up against with Circle of Six. Now I have thought that Circle of Six and college campuses would be this incredible marriage. You know, colleges would totally embrace this and want to customize it for their campuses. Now granted, I haven't gone knocking on every single campus door, but they certainly haven't really come knocking on ours. And the bottom line is, and I'm sure you know if you work with institutions like campuses, they actually don't want the data. I have thought, you know, we have this tool. We can track data on your campuses. We can tell you, you know, where a lot of problems are happening, where women don't feel safe on your campus, how many times people hit this button, what's going on. The bottom line is that most universities, unless they have excellent sexual assault policies and are pretty revolutionary, don't want that information. So that's something I was shocked at, that campuses are not natural allies. For sure college students are adopting it, but to get a top-down adoption, that's going to be a much different kind of process. I think, you know, we also, another sort of limitation, or where we're moving for version 2, is data collection. This first version did not collect data, so we don't know how many times people have clicked various buttons. We do know, you know, that we have X amount of downloads, and we know that it's being used in 26 countries. So, so that's, you know, that kind of information, but any kind of deeper data we don't have yet and we'll be working on for version 2. The other piece here is the digital divide, of course. This is a smartphone application for iOS and Android. Many young people don't have smartphones. As someone pointed out earlier, if you're in an abusive relationship and your partner controls your phone, if you're working internationally, people, you know, iPhones are way more expensive abroad than they are here. So those are some of the things that we've encountered with the app, and we're looking forward to, you know, ways to improve it in our next version. So really that's it for me on kind of a formal presentation. So I'm wondering if folks have questions, you know, aside from where to find stuff. BlackBerry, good question. I mean, BlackBerry has this so the question, as I'm sure you guys can see, is are we doing this for BlackBerry? BlackBerry has this interesting new platform for BlackBerry 10 that you just kind of type in the code and it translates it. I don't know how elegant that is right now. I don't know if it's the equivalent of Google Translator, which we all know is very inelegant. So we are considering, but we have a small capacity. That's the other piece I wanted to point out. My engineer, we're interested in Windows. We're interested in BlackBerry. We know that both of those platforms also have internal support because a lot of apps are not being built for those platforms. So we're hoping to kind of get support to build it out on those platforms. I know the military. One reason I'd be very excited to get this on BlackBerry is for the military because they all use BlackBerry, but I heard that's also changing. So I heard the military might be migrating from BlackBerry elsewhere, so I'm not sure. I'm sure Emily can speak to this too. It's always interesting to know what platforms are hot and then which ones die. Like everyone in India uses a Nokia, but that's going to be over in about 6 months. So it's hard to keep up with the technology as it changes to stay relevant and try and reach as many people as possible. Other questions? And I hope it's kind of clear. We also have on whereisyourline.org a bunch of 30-second PSA videos. So if you can't get the line into your classroom, or you don't have 25 minutes and you even just have 45 seconds or 90 seconds, you can use any of the videos that we've built, which I'm calling both storytelling and technology, as a way to address sexual assault. Or you can download the Where's Your Line sticker for free from our site and just have people think about their own boundaries. So let's see, what about some sort of app that would aim more at men to address consent? Right. Right. Great question, Tracy. So a big piece of pushback that I got when we first presented this at a sexual assault conference was, how can you call this a prevention app, right? How can you call Circle of Six a violence prevention tool? And I totally get it, right? Because we all know, and we just heard in the intro, that prevention is about teaching young men and boys not to perpetuate sexual assault and not to perpetuate rape. Absolutely, we need an app that tells men not to rape, whether it starts out as a Yes Men. If you know the Yes Men, they're this very ironic, very funny group of guys that kind of come up with pranks. Like, I had an idea that we do a prank app, what to do if you're about to rape, and there's that meme went around the internet, you know, stop me if I'm about to do this, you know, to create awareness about how ridiculous it is. Absolutely, we need an app that can address men and boys' violence against women and other victims. But I also wonder if we're even there yet as far as momentum in the men's movement. I know there's a lot of talk about bystanders. There's Green Dot campaign. There's bystander intervention work on the ground. I'm talking to someone at Stanford about this. Men Can Stop Rape is talking about this. I think the men's movement as well needs to build more capacity to get adoption if something like that is built. And I totally agree that I just feel like it might even be too soon to have the app without the film or without the movement that has caught on, that is in schools, that has a celebrity attached to it, speaking out about that kind of thing. And I totally hear you, Tracy, and I have the same thoughts. But I honestly think that kind of app is a little advanced for the men, for where men are now and where the conversation is now. I'm sure you all heard what happened when Zerlina Maxwell said, women don't need guns, we need to teach men not to rape. And the kind of response she got and the kind of response the media, you know, had to Steubenville boys being convicted, you know, I just think we need, that would be a little advanced, although absolutely necessary. I will gladly talk a bit about XOXO SMS. XO is a 15-minute film. I just got news that it actually will be on POV, the Point of View program for PBS. So when the film is broadcast, I will make sure everyone knows and you all can see it. But it's a very sweet film about two kids who meet online through a Facebook game and fall in love without ever meeting each other. So they're totally different. One is a homeschooled kid, lives in rural Illinois. The other woman is from Korea, and she's an art student. And they create a real intimacy through Skyping and chatting and texting without meeting. So the question asked, can online love exist in the real world? And is there such a thing as digital intimacy? And I had thought that teenagers would love the movie and totally, you know, just, oh, this is awesome. But actually they're so steeped in it, that's their world. They're like, yeah, whatever, this is how it is. The people who really love the film are the parents. You know, I heard parents say, oh, I finally get it. Like, we don't have to be totally terrified that our children are on the internet all the time. People can formulate beautiful relationships and trust and learn about themselves through the internet. So it's sort of a counter to all the stuff out there about you're going to meet your killer online. So it's like takes down the panic of the internet and shows this concept I call digital intimacy. So the website there, I'll give it to you, but I'm excited to announce that we are looking at a sort of film PBS broadcast soon, so you'll be able to see it on TV as well. I wanted to also just say one more thing about limitations about a lot of this work is, we talk about who's in the room when we have these conversations. So what Tracy or someone else just said, right, so if we did have this app about accountability or bystanders, I think it's a great start. But the download numbers would be all the guys who already are sort of at a place where they understand why it's necessary. And a similar thing happened with the line. The line is like, oh, I'm in the room unless it's mandated by the dean. I don't have football players coming out to my screening about sex, consent, power, and pleasure. Unless it's coming from the top down, I do not have those kinds of folks in the room. I have the choir. So one thing that's pretty awesome about Circle of Six, although not totally advanced on the prevention spectrum, it's not the choir that's downloading it. It's girls who read Cosmo because Cosmo featured it. It's, all kinds of gals who go off to college are downloading it. So it's not just feminists, and it's not just people who are activated around violence. So even if we can just do a little bit by having resources online and having it be judgment-free, we can inform the conversation in a positive way and just meet people where they are. Other cues. Absolutely. So Jasmine asked if Circle of Six is being used by young men. Absolutely. Our designer is queer, and he grew up a victim of bullying on the streets of the city he grew up in because he was noticeably queer. And all of our language is gender neutral. Absolutely. I've heard from queer young men and women and trans youth that they're using it. So it's really for anyone to use. The other piece about accountability and getting involved as a man, on campuses young men come up to me and say, my friend was raped and I don't know how to help her, or what can I do about this problem? And if there's no men's group on campus, and I can send them to a few links, but there's not much I can really tell them to do aside from address sexism when you see it. So we found that a lot of men are in women's circles. So if I'm a woman user, when I use Circle of Six, 3 of my 6 are men. So it's also just a very tangible way for young men to support and be accountable to other women, to their friends. So we're hearing that a lot. I want to check in on time, if we're doing all right on time, or if you guys will tell me how we're doing.
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, great. One more question. That can be typed in, or maybe the organizers have one.
Yeah, if no one has any more questions, then I think that wraps up your portion, Nancy.
Great. Well, thanks for participating, and I'll make sure to send out links, as I'm sure the Alliance will too. And look forward to sticking around for the rest of the webinar.
Yes, we will. We'll include all your information on the resources page that we'll have linked and available on our website in several days. And I just wanted to thank you for speaking firsthand about your valuable contributions. And I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say that your efforts are really appreciated, and your will to change norms is really inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing your story and the story of others. We really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so now moving on to our next guest presenter. We have Emily May, co-founder of the NYC-based organization Holla Back. Founded in 2005, Holla Back seeks to empower victims of street harassment. Emily became the first full-time executive director of the organization in 2010. She brings a refreshing perspective on how to leverage technology to generate social change by working to end public sexual harassment and assault. So welcome, Emily. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Thanks to the Alliance and Joanna and Laura over there, and thanks also to my co-presenter Nancy for that great presentation. So as introduced, I am Emily May, Executive Director of Hollaback. So I think I have about 15 minutes or so left. Is that right, Joanna, to present before you guys need to go on again?
You can take as much time as you need, Emily.
Okay. I started Hollaback back in 2005. I was 24 years old. And what I want to do today is kind of go through the story of how we got started with Hollaback, and I want to talk to you about two different change strategies that I think the Internet really allows for and that I would encourage you to use in your own work. One of those change strategies is telling untold stories, which I know the movement is well-versed in and has always been well-versed in. And the second is looking at diverse and decentralized leadership as a strategy for really growing and expanding this movement and our work. So to back up, 2005, I was sitting on a roof deck with some friends of mine, and I had moved to New York City when I was 18 years old and been harassed probably 3 or 4 times a day, if 3 or 4 times a week. I mean, it was almost incessant, and I felt like everywhere I go, I was constantly walking around in fear of harassment. But I also felt that that no one was talking about it. I felt like nobody really cared about these stories and these experiences, and so perhaps the fact that I cared about them somehow made me weak, and wanting to be the strong feminist that I do want to be, I really stayed quiet about it. And so when we started to have those stories and told in 2005, it was really eye-opening to hear that these were not just my experiences, but the experiences of my friends. And one of my best friends from growing up, Sam Carter, piped up and looked me in the eye, and Sam is male-identified, and he said, "Emily, you live in a completely different New York City than I do." And I agreed. It was completely different than what Sam grew up in, and collectively we resolved to change that. And we'd recently heard about the story of a young woman named Thao Nguyen. And Thao was riding the New York City subway when an older man sat down across from her, pulled out his penis, and started to masturbate. Thao pulled out her cell phone camera. She took a picture of him with the idea of taking it to the police. She didn't necessarily identify as a feminist or an activist. She was just a woman who wanted evidence so that the police could catch this guy. But when she took it to the police, they more or less ignored her. She then took that photo home. She put it on Flickr, the photo sharing website, where it very quickly went viral. It made it to the front cover of the New York Daily News and ignited this citywide conversation about public masturbation that some of you may remember, having been in the field for a while. And we were just so inspired by this young woman's ability to really take the lens and turn it around on the person who was harassing her, and in doing so, ignite this conversation. It felt like to us, everyone either had a story or they knew somebody that had a story. And my boss at the time had seen that exact guy also masturbating on the subway. As it turns out, he was the owner of 2 raw foods restaurants named Quintessence, and your everyday upper middle class New Yorker, lover of extreme sports. But through Thao's bold action, she ultimately got him prosecuted, and really got our wheels thinking about what we could do to address street harassment in New York City. So that brings me to the first strategy that I really want to go over is this idea of telling untold stories. You guys know within the sexual violence movement that this is a tried and true and well-tested strategy. In the 1960s and 70s, we saw consciousness-raising groups bring tons of awareness to sexual violence. We've also seen Take Back the Night, especially on college campuses, where folks come together and share these stories. And I think that if you look at really social movements as a whole, not just within our own movement, but broadly, you'll see that social change tends to be catalyzed by stories. If you look at the story of Rosa Parks or the story of Anita Hill related to workplace harassment or Rodney King related to police brutality, you'll see that these stories really ignited a movement in and of itself and really got people to think about these experiences in a very different way than they were thinking about them before, and these injustices in a different way than they were thinking about them before. And so when we went into it, we didn't think to ourselves, you know, I know what social movement building strategy number one should be storytelling. We just thought to ourselves, like, wow, here's this amazing woman. Let's see if we can collect these stories from around New York City and get people to submit text describing what happened to them and also optional photos. But before I go on and show you some of that, I really want to hone in on one little thing, and you'll see on the top of this bike in this picture, I have stuck this little tiny graphic here in hopes of reminding myself to talk about this, because I adore this stuff. And this is the science behind storytelling online, right? This is, you know, we have heard a lot of pushback saying, you know, consciousness-raising groups, take back the night, it's different. That is people sitting around in a circle. It unites people in a very different way than the Internet does. And I've heard it, and I've listened to it, and I get it. And one day I was watching this TED Talk by a guy named Dr. Paul Zak, or who names himself Dr. Love. And he did this comprehensive research study on the science, the chemical oxytocin. And are folks familiar with what oxytocin is? It is the love hormone. It is the thing that you release when you're breastfeeding. You release it when you're hugging. You release it when you're listening to stories. It is a really lovely thing. And what Dr. Paul Zak showed is that oxytocin is actually released through social media. And that's a pretty powerful thing, because that undoes a lot of the presumptions that we have that social media is a very flat form, and that we aren't getting the human connectivity that we need in order to make bigger movements and bigger social justice things happen. So gotta love the oxytocin, but you also gotta love the platform in itself, right? You look at something like street harassment. It's an incredibly isolating experience. I could walk down the street in front of my my building 10 times, and 10 times I could be totally fine, and on the 11th time I could get harassed twice on that street. And you just don't know when it's going to happen, and you don't know how it's going to happen. And that makes it very, very hard to organize around. It's not like a lunch counter where they knew when they sat there what exactly would happen. When you don't know when harassment is going to happen, it's hard to get that catalyzing story that makes movements grow and expand. But now we can. So in 2005, we launched that blog here in New York City that is still alive and kicking today. And we started collecting stories and pictures, optional photos of street harassment. And we were shocked and with how inundated we were with stories, and shocked at the nerve, I think, that we struck here in New York City. When we started this work, we had never even heard the term harassment. In fact, we thought we had invented it. We obviously didn't. For those of you that have been in the movement for a long time, it definitely predates us, but it just wasn't anywhere. And even now, if you look for a Google trend search on the word street harassment, you don't see it popping up in media searches anywhere until 2005. And so we went around and like Nancy, got great exposure, and I did Good Morning America at the age of 24, and immediately got a phone call from my mother telling me that my earrings were too dangly, but off we went, right? And so it was an incredible experience, but it was an incredible experience because we had really met a need, and there was just such an incredible demand for what we were doing, not just in New York City, but also globally. And so when we looked at turning into a nonprofit in 2010, which we ultimately did, and transitioning from being just that side activist project that ran a blog for free on the side and did advocacy work. We thought to ourselves, what new technology is out there in the world? And in 2005, it was these cell phone cameras were new, these blogs were new, and in 2010, it was mapping, which we originally didn't have in 2005, but is here now, and also these things called apps. So we develop these apps, and they are just another way to report your experience of harassment and or bystander intervention, and to get that experience mapped. And I think what's awesome about storytelling in the digital age isn't just that you have a whole new platform. It's not just that all of us could share a story to over 1,000 people right now if we wanted to. It's not just that social media helps us exude oxytocin, right? But although those things are great too. It's also that we're able to tell stories in wildly different ways than we historically have been able to. So using data that we've collected through our blog and through these apps, what we've done is we have taken this data, and this is actually data collected through our I've Got Your Back campaign, which is our bystander campaign. But we've taken this data and we've cut it along district lines. So here in New York City, we literally have maps of every single district, every single council district across the city, and we have mapped each incident of harassment in that particular district. And we take those maps to legislators and we say, look at what is going on in your district. What are you going to do to address it? And look, the thing that all of us have on our side is no legislator is going to publicly say, I am pro-sexual assault, I am pro-street harassment, right? There is a pro-rape lobby, it's called Rape Culture, but there's no pro-rape lobby that's organized enough to show up in force to City Hall and to sway their opinion. So we've at least got that going on our side, and when you show people the extent to which this stuff is happening, these legislators are just like, oh my God, we have to do something about this. And we're like, yes, we do. And so what we advocate and lobby for here in New York City is increased education. We want to see street harassment education integrated into anti-bullying efforts and integrated early. We want to see it happening in middle schools for both men and women, or young men and young women. And we want to really start to change those norms from an early age. We also want to see public service announcement campaigns. We worked with New Yorkers for Safe Transit to get the anti-harassment campaigns that are in the subways now. We want to, again, work to get an even bigger campaign up into the subways, buses, bus stops that really demonstrates that street harassment is not okay, that if it happens you can report it via these apps, and I'm going to get to that project in just a second, and also about bystander intervention, which we believe is a really key intervention here. So I'm going to quickly talk about bystander intervention and our I've Got Your Back campaign, and then I'm going to circle back and talk about our project with the New York City Council to expand our apps with them. So the I've Got Your Back campaign was developed in a pretty innocent way. And I say a really innocent way because unlike you, I did not come from this field. I worked in this field as an activist for 5 years, but it's very different than having formal training and working for agencies like you all work for. I just saw these maps of harassment happening, and every day I would go to these websites and I would see more pink dots representing harassment. And I thought to myself, all right, like this is good, I guess, because more people are reporting it, right, which indicates that there's resistance, that they're taking action. But it's also bad because there's more harassment happening. And it started to look like one of those scary epidemic maps where every day you open it up and the problem looks a little bit worse. And so I met with our volunteer team and I was just like, can we map anything that's happy? Is there anything related to street harassment that ever happens that's happy? We sat around and we thought about it and we thought about it, and we were like, well, you know when like somebody asks you if you're okay, or they'll like stand up for you and tell the person that harassed you that they're a jerk. Those are happy moments. And we were like, yeah, those are good. Those are good moments. Those are good moments in the story of harassment. We were like, we should map those moments. And then we looked around a little bit and we realized those moments were called bystander intervention. And we thought, cool, so we'll map this thing called bystander intervention in green dots because green looks really good with pink. And then we found out there was an already organization called Green Dots. So we called them up and we said, hey, we're a little tiny Hollaback over here and thinking about doing this bystander thing and don't want to, start mapping green dots with bystander intervention without your, consent in this. Don't want to take your branding from you. And they said, oh, no problem. Like, do you need help with that? And we said, yeah. So we are partnered with Green Dot on our I've Got Your Back campaign. It's an effort to educate bystanders on what type of interventions they can do when they experience harassment, what kind of interventions they can do when they witness harassment. Which could be anything from delegate to somebody else, like your MTA worker or police officer, the bigger, scarier guy down the train. It could be creating a distraction, like dropping your coffee cup or asking the person doing the harassing for the time or for directions. Or it could be directly intervening in that particular moment. And the idea of Green Dot is to really give people options so that they know that there are choices that they can make when they witness harassment happening. My personal favorite is to ask the person who was harassed if they're okay and let them make the decision as to what they want to do next, whether it's reporting it to the police or getting extra help or support or just me walking them to where they need to go. But our data that we've done with Cornell University shows that even as little as a knowing glance can actually reduce the trauma related to street harassment. What increases the trauma is when people do nothing. No knowing glances, no are you okay, no acknowledgement, everyone just looking the other way. So we just started this campaign realizing that harassment happens so often. We need to have each other's backs. We need to be there for each other. And also on our website we implemented an I've Got Your Back button so that when folks aren't there in person to witness harassment, that when they read about it, they can virtually have people's backs as well. And so that is that's our I've Got Your Back campaign. Circling back really quick to the apps. So here's what we're doing with our apps in New York City. And you may have heard about this already. This may be new. In any case, we would love your support on it. We have received a teeny tiny bit of funding from the New York City Council to take our free iPhone and Android apps, which are available in 10 different languages, and to connect them to the New York City Council. What does that mean? That means that when you report your harassment, you can also opt in as a user to reporting it directly to your council member. You'll also be able, and if you report it to your council member, they will collect a whole other set of data really be able to target the institutions that can address this. So if it happened around a school, right, they'll be targeting Department of Education. If it happened in a building, they'll be letting Department of Buildings know about it. If it happened in a park, right, that information will go to Department of Parks. And it's a longer-term strategy to gather the data that we need to be able to demonstrate the extent to which this happens. I know the whole movement is in a desert of data, but the street harassment movement is in a very dry desert of data around street harassment. We have almost nothing. We have almost no reports that go through the police. I think in New York City it was something like 3,000 people reported 300 people reported being groped on the subways last year, which we all know is just like 0.01% of what actually happens. in New York City. So what we're hoping to do is to use this as a way to gather data so we can better know what the problem is in New York City, and so that we can better engage legislators in those prevention efforts that I spoke to you about earlier. As part of those prevention efforts, moving ahead real quick, part of what the apps are going to do is it's going to have resources. So if your organization provides or is willing to provide any sort of service to people that have been harassed or groped or assaulted in public space, I will have information at the end of this on how you can reach out to our team, and those resources will be listed on these apps when they relaunch at some point this spring or early summer. And then the last piece is it'll put you through a Know Your Rights scenario. A lot of people don't know, is verbal harassment legal or illegal? Is groping a misdemeanor or a felony? And so it'll educate people on what their rights are based on what their experience is and what's happened to them, so that they can make a decision as to whether or not they want to report it to the NYPD. Okay, any questions about all that good stuff? Why does it require an email? Oh, the email is made anonymous, and it's really just so that we can track how many users we have. Okay. The second piece of this, I want to highlight it because I think that there's some real exciting potential here. I'm not going to spend as much time on it because I think that because you guys all are focused in your specific areas and local agencies. But for me, one of the really exciting things about the Internet is our ability to really establish diverse and decentralized leadership. And this is a huge component that we brought on into our work when we launched as a nonprofit in 2010. Although I'll tell you, we're now in 62 cities in 25 countries and only funded to be in one. And you all are probably sitting in it right now. So, there are challenges to doing this work, but there's also an incredible opportunity. I think that what we're seeing is that there is, especially among young people, and perhaps there's always been, right, an intolerance towards a singular charismatic leader. Because now all of us exist in a world where we've got one person outside of the U.S., yes. But all of us exist in a world where we all have our platforms, right? We all have the ability to tell our story to those 1,000 people within a few minutes if we so choose by the time we tweet and Facebook and export all our email contacts, right? And so we all have this ability to be leaders in our own world. And I think for the traditional nonprofit institution that has a singular executive director that stands up on the platform and does the song and dance and energizes everyone, it can be a very scary and challenging thing. But for social movement building, it's an incredible opportunity because it's allowing us to build movements that are big and global, and it's allowing us to do it with relatively little funding, just lots of training and support. And so what we have done to really grow Hollaback globally is we train leaders around the world to bring the movement home to their own communities. Now here's what's different than most nonprofits that you're familiar with. We really let them own it. So here in New York City, we do not endorse increased criminalization as a strategy to address street harassment because we're worried about the impact that it would have and that it would be disproportionately used against low-income communities and communities of color. And we also see, a fair amount of harassment coming from the police themselves. And there's an uncertainty broadly, I think, within our community as to whether or not they're the right or the best people to be administering that. But we have, sites around the world that take differing perspectives on that. And our role is to really foster and to grow that conversation, but not to be prescriptive in terms of how people are going to address this issue in their locality. We give them an independent blog. They use our name. They get our logos with their own name on them. And after 3 months of training, is file and a bunch of planning forms and press releases that they have to develop and work that they have to do on their site. They launch and they go off into the world, and they are really just growing this movement globally and really moving our capacity to address this issue from one where we used to think global and act local to now where we really collaborate globally and act locally. So really quickly, I'm going to show you pictures. This is Hollaback in Boston doing a workshop for young folks. And this is Hollaback in Honduras doing a march against street harassment. I want to move on because I'm aware of time. If you're interested in working with us, I encourage you all to download your apps and share your story at ihollaback.org. And also, we're having an upcoming rally, anti-street harassment rally. We're doing it in partnership with Councilmember Ferreras' office, as well as wonderful organizations like Girls for Gender, the Alliance, smaller groups like Catcalled, Brooklyn Movement Center. So we are really excited about it. We're still open to speakers if any of you would like to speak at that rally. And also if you would like to co-sponsor it, please reach out as well. But of course, attend. It will be right to east of the fountain at the there's a little stage east of the fountain, so it'll be right over there at 12 noon. And then last piece, just a reminder that if you do offer services that could help survivors of street harassment, to shoot an email to our amazing Deputy Director, Debjani Roy. Her email is right there, and she can make sure that you're included in our apps, and also our soon-to-launch guide for employers and nonprofits on what to do when their staff and clients experience harassment. And then last but not least, we do offer bystander intervention trainings, and we have a couple more slots open to provide those trainings within New York City. So if you would like them offered if you work with kids, if you want us to give a training to your young people, or if you'd like that offered at your institution or to your staff, please also reach out to our email is right there. And I think that is it for me. I'm very happy to take questions. I have a question coming in on what is the cost of training. So our trainings are completely free for leaders around the world, and we have a little subset of sites popping up around New York City too, where we launched Hollaback NYU. We're looking into launching Hollaback at New School, and we also are looking into potentially doing something in Bed-Stuy as well. So, but it is, it is a time commitment. So, that's part of it. But we really wanted to make it accessible for folks to be able to do this, because the people who are most impacted by street harassment are people that are low income, people of color, young people, LGBTQ individuals, and so accessibility is really important to us. Other questions? Great, thanks Tracy, who says she will download the app and share it with the youth that she works with, and maybe even bring them to the street harassment rally. Maybe not, I put that part in. Tracy, we would love your youth at the rally. They're welcome to come and speak and present. Any other questions?
All right, so it seems like that's it for questions, and I just wanted to thank you, Emily, for sharing your inspiring and progressive work with us. We really appreciated having you here, and for giving us some context as to why this technology is really important.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me.
We were short on time, and we did skip over a few slides, and if you are interested in reviewing them on your own time, you could see the ones that we skipped when we post the link on our website. They'll be mentioned in the Alliance blog as well. And we'd like to extend a thank you to our guest presenters and to all of the participants who attended this webinar. We hope that you found the content both helpful and informative, and we appreciate your interest in the topic. If you have any further inquiries, you can contact the facilitators at the email addresses listed on the slide. We also encourage you to visit the New York City Alliance Against Sexual Assault's website. A link to today's PowerPoint slides, audio recording, and resources list will be available on our website within the next several days. Upon exiting the webinar, you will be immediately prompted to complete a brief survey. Your feedback is greatly appreciated and will definitely help guide the development of our future webinars. If you're unable to complete the survey at this moment, you can do so at a later point. An email will be sent to all attendees with a link to the survey. Finally, please expect a follow-up assessment survey within the next month or two. This will help us gauge the long-term impact of our webinar. Thank you very much for participating, and we appreciate it.